Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. I know that Mark Carney is one of the worst politicians in Canadian history because if he wasn't one of the worst, he wouldn't be currently in a close leadership battle with one of the other worst politicians in Canadian history, Chrystia Freeland. When this Liberal Party leadership race first kicked off to find a replacement for Justin Trudeau, it was slated as being a Mark Carney coronation. Mark Carney has superior resources, money, and endorsements to Chrystia Freeland, but the problem is that he also is the candidate, and he is politically incompetent. He could not shut his mouth for a second, and there are all of these clips from both his past and his present coming out to haunt him, where he says ridiculous or radical things and shows how out of touch he is to the average Canadian. You've probably already seen this clip where Mark Carney actually touts his background as a globalist and an elitist as being a good thing.
My strength is I know how the world works. I know how to get things done. I'm connected. I can deliver for the country. And my weakness is, people will charge me as being elitist or a globalist, to use that term, which is, that's exactly, it happens to be exactly what we need.
That clip reminds me of that clip of Senator Bernie Sanders saying, people criticize all of these socialist countries for having bread lines, but that's a good thing because it means people are getting bread. So Mark Carney saying, like, people are saying that I'm an elitist controlling technocrat, but in fact, we should have an elitist controlling technocrat leading Canada. You can feel Mark Carney's comms director quivering every time he gets up in front of a crowd of people and starts talking because he causes so many fires. And now it appears like Mark Carney is trying to hide himself from the public and just doing the most easy interviews you've ever seen in your life. And when I say easy, I mean Rosemary Barton easy. And even then, he is basically just putting people to sleep. Mark Carney only has two modes: putting people to sleep and saying insanely radical things. This is why I have taken to calling him Marx Carney, and I want to get to that episode a little bit later. I called him that on social media, and the reaction from liberals and leftists was hilarious. But here is Mark Carney on CBC trying to do some damage control by doing his best John Kerry impression he has.
One of the most important things we can do for Canada, but also for the negotiations, is to concentrate on what we can control. We can't control President Trump, but we can control what we do here at home to reinforce our economy. So that's middle-class tax cut, that's investing in infrastructure, it's building new trade routes, it's doing all those things. It's having one Canadian economy instead of 13. And what I'm being more and more clear about is exactly how I would do that if I am selected.
And I will ask you some of those questions, but I still think that it would be helpful.
This is actual brain poison to watch. And he's already trying to pivot himself into being the fiscally moderate guy. Maybe I would back tax cuts for the middle class. He's not going to do it. Do you know how I know? Well, although Mark Carney pretends that he's an outsider because he's never been elected, for the last 4 to 5 years, he has been the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. In fact, Chrystia Freeland can actually divest herself of her terrible record as finance minister because she can kind of rightfully claim she wasn't even making decisions the last 4 years. Mark Carney was telling her what to do, and Justin Trudeau would fire her if she didn't do it. I hope she brings that up at the debates because it would absolutely destroy his campaign. To put it in perspective, if you haven't seen this poll result yet, Main Street Research did a poll of only Liberal Party members, people who have Liberal Party memberships, and it found that Mark Carney is only sitting at 38% support, with Chrystia Freeland at 29% and Karina Gould at 18%. Ruby Dahl also has 5%, and Frank Bayles has 2%. That's pathetic. What the Conservative Party leadership race in 2022 was a Pierre Poilievre coronation, not because anyone was pulling strings or trying to rig stuff. He was just extremely popular and won with like 68% of the vote. And I think on points it was even more than that. It was crazy how big his win was. 38% is going to be him crawling across the finish line. In fact, this entire leadership race right now reminds me of Hillary Clinton being unable to put away Bernie Sanders in the 2016 primaries. when you're running in a presidential election, and it works the same way if you're the prime ministerial candidate for your party in Canada, if you're in a party leadership race or a primary and you can't put away your somewhat kooky and uncharismatic opponent, then you are in really big trouble. I know some people consider Bernie Sanders charismatic, but in terms of his demographic appeals, he should be very easy to beat because he has no support with Black or Hispanic voters, and it's mostly just middle-class hipster white people voting for him. And it still took until after California, at like the end of the primary, for her to finally beat Bernie Sanders, even with superdelegates on her side. And now this is also reminding me of Kim Campbell barely beating Jean Charest in 1993 when the PC party was also trying to make it a coronation. It's a pattern. If it's supposed to be your coronation and it barely happens, you're not becoming prime minister, or at least you're not going to stay prime minister very long in Kim Campbell's case and potentially Mark Carney's. But you look at the man's social media, and it's just nothing. It's just him posting like some boilerplate stuff about condemning anti-Semitism, in which it took him like several hours more than all the other candidates, and just posting stuff like this. Canadians want change. Together we can make that happen. Join our campaign and commit to vote today. He's posting nothing. It's because he's a gaffe machine. You remember that clip from Kelowna where he said that the fentanyl crisis in Canada is not a crisis, it's just a challenge. What? He's backed carbon credits. He's backed a carbon tax tariff. He has backed oil and gas development in Brazil and the UAE, but said that Canada shouldn't be doing that. He has supported having massive government subsidies of green energy to build an energy firewall against the United States if they ever cut off energy transportation to Canada. It's asinine. At the same time, Chrystia Freeland, as an absolute dud of her candidate herself, is actually starting to rack up more endorsements. And it's because a lot of people are looking at Mark Carney. They realize that this guy cannot walk 5 feet without stepping on his own shoelaces. And they're coming back to give a fourth look at Chrystia Freeland, who's not particularly good at all. She's actually getting some ministers and other senior liberal officials endorsing her, right? Like Rob Oliphant here. Other people, I'm trying to find other people she's gotten endorsements from. Oh, she keeps reposting the same stuff. But she gotten Jean Yip. Other Liberal MPs are all coming up for her now. John Aldag, a former Liberal MP, he lost his election as a BC NDP candidate recently to Harman Bangu in the provincial election. But she's starting to racking up the endorsements once again. And it's because Carney is actually a liability right now. The Liberal Party thought they were getting the exterior of Carney, the button-down central banker who appeals to a certain type of older middle-class voter. What they really got was what I refer to as Marx Carney, because this guy is the definition of what a Soviet technocratic economic manager would be back in the 1960s and 70s. I had a post go viral today where I said that conservatives, not the Conservative Party specifically, but just conservatives in Canada in general, should start referring to Mark Carney as Marx Carney, and this post went very viral. It already has 112,000 views on X. And I did this as a legitimate joke on the Liberals as well as the left in general in Canada. Because as soon as I referred to him as Marx Carney, they all started running out of the woodwork to say, no, actually, he's not a Marxist at all. He's not a communist. And then started proving me right in my more general point that he's a big government technocrat. They start going through how he's basically a social democrat, that he is a central banker, he is a Keynesian economist and stuff like that. It's like, guys, you are describing 60s socialist politics. You were describing, again, like I said, the sort of man that in Russia would be the person telling you what to do, when to do it, and how exactly to do it. There's this idea that all the communists in the Soviet Union and Maoist China were romantic revolutionaries like Joseph Stalin or Mao Zedong. That's not really how it went. Yes, you had the crazy kleptocratic psychos on top like Mao and Stalin and Lenin and Pol Pot, but the people below them were other than in Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge regime because they killed anyone with glasses. But they would usually have people staring at charts and trying to crunch the numbers, figuring out what should be put out, how much money should go towards it, and how many workers should be hired and stuff like that. That is exactly who Mark Carney is. He is a technocratic lefty who would fit in perfectly in a Soviet Department of Economic Management. I also have to show you the post I got because this was a great AI image I generated of Marx Carney himself that I think that really drove the point home, and this post also went viral. So I've been kind of tearing it up today. Make sure you guys follow me on X. I am a good time over there. But we have Marx Carney here. And again, it does fit. Most people will get my point. I'm not meaning this literally, but the fact that my point is generally correct, that the man is the sort of person who backs central bank digital currency and wants to monitor what people spend and to limit how much carbon that you're emitting and how much meat you're eating is very telling. Nate Erskine Smith even endorsed the man who is in favor of mass drug legalization, as well as trying to limit how much red meat people consume because Nate Erskine Smith is a radical vegetarian. Anyways, I now want to bring up this clip from the UN's own website of Mark Carney talking about basically trying to fast forward a green economy. And again, like always, he ends up making himself look like a radical twit.
Is acting is society is putting tremendous value on achieving net zero. So the companies and those who invest in them and lend to them, who are part of the solution, will be rewarded. But those who are lagging behind and are still part of the problem will be punished.
Does that sound like somebody who's just moderate? We're going to punish.
The dialogue has shifted from viewing climate change as a risk, and of course it is an enormous risk. We recognize that, but to seeing the opportunity, first point, and really translating that into a single objective, which is to move our economies to net zero as quickly as possible. That's a tremendously exciting development, because what we have now in private finance is a focus on a clear goal, net zero, and finding the opportunities to advance that and to be rewarded by it. And also at the same time, not just for private finance to judge which companies are part of the solution, but what's exciting and interesting and challenging for the private financial sector is increasingly they too are being judged. So now,
what he is describing here is effectively a government incentive structure to cause large investment hedge funds and whatnot to only pick government-approved net zero companies. This is the sort of thing that BlackRock and Larry Fink do through ESG scores, and Mark Carney is a big believer in this, and I don't think he's changed. I want to play one more clip of the man because, again, it's crazy how much ammunition this guy generates. The NRA must love him because this man generates ammunition all day long. Here is him on Global News, that clip that Melissa Lantsman, the deputy leader of the Conservative Party, highlighted that I think is quite good. Again, this man, these are recent clips of his campaign. He cannot turn it off. He has no good answers to anyone saying, aren't you kind of basically exactly the same as Justin Trudeau? If anything, that's giving him credit, because he's worse than Justin Trudeau.
Especially considering a lot of the values you have, even the issues you support are very much tied to similar things that the Prime Minister currently believes in.
First thing, I agreed to build out a task force for growth for the Prime Minister. That task force for growth is now embodied in me, and the steps we're going to take forward.
So he just confirms it right there. Even as he's trying to pivot off of him being exactly like Justin Trudeau, he just admits that everything that Justin Trudeau was doing up to this point was put together by Mark Carney. The debates could be a bloodbath right now, because there is definitely blood in the water around Mark Carney's campaign, because I like to quote this Civil War, paraphrasing a Civil War quote, that while bringing superior forces and firepower to the battlefield, he also unfortunately brought himself, because Mark Carney is going to be a terrible debater, especially in the French debate, where Frank Baylis is going to run circles around him and and Karina Gould and Chrystia Freeland obviously also have better French than he does. Frank Bayless has the best because he's from Montreal, and what I've heard is that Mark Carney's French is meh. And right now, if he starts losing Quebec voters, his path to victory might fade very quickly. And then the English debate, he'll have Ruby Dalla to contend with, who looks like she is just preparing to just throw haymakers at the guy the entire time. And if the Liberal Party ends up with Chrystia Freeland, I really don't see them as being in a better position than they would be with Mark Carney. I think both of them basically pose the same problem to the Liberal Party. Mark Carney on paper is better because he's less well known and has less baggage, but he has different types of baggage. It's just not as directly connected to Trudeau as it is for Freeland because she's been standing beside the guy for 9 years. With Mark Carney, it's more so that there is a closet full of thousands of skeletons that's kind of open right now, but if he wins and becomes the leader and the prime minister, that thing is going to be thrown open by the Conservatives and a lot of other influencers online, and they're going to pour out in front of Canadians with every one of his far left ideas. He is an economic manager. He's not a free market guy. My whole Marx Carney op today proved that, because all the liberals who supporting him would never say he's free market because they don't want a free market guy. They criticize Pierre Poilievre for being the free market guy, but they can't say he's a communist, but I also never accused him of being a communist. They just have to use weasel words to describe a technocratic busybody without admitting that he's effectively a socialist. Anyways, so that should be it for me today, guys. Support me by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving me a comment. As much fun as I have covering politics, the Liberal leadership race is also extremely annoying to cover because these people are the worst, and there's really no bright spots to talk about other than anticipating their failure one day when Pierre Poilievre beats them. But anyway, so that should be it for me. See you guys later.